In this video, we're going to look at 10 tips on how to conduct yourself in an examination room when you're writing physics. Right, so please remember to subscribe to the channel, Physics Tips for Cambridge Students YouTube channel, and remember also to hit the notification bell, like and share to as many candidates that you think would find this helpful. Without much further ado, let's get started. Now, the first tip is to calm down. So make sure you calm down and take deep breaths. So calm down and take deep breaths. So this is for you to settle down. So in other words, you need to settle down in the exam room. Very, very important. If you can say a prayer just before you start the exam, that will also help you just to stabilize you, and remember to stay positive. So in my video on how to revise, I emphasize this point on staying positive. Your subconscious must be full of positive thoughts. Everything must be positive around you. And the confidence that you have, not too much, but just enough confidence for you to manage to carry yourself through the exam. Right, tip number 2 is to read the instructions very, very carefully. So do not miss any information from there so that you get all the marks, because sometimes you get penalized for doing the wrong thing or not being able to read the instructions. Now, for the IGCSE guys, your G is supposed to be 10. They actually write this on the instructions. You're supposed to use G as 10 newtons per kg. Now, for the AS candidates and A2, your G is supposed to be 9.81. It's actually given in the formula list. Okay, so the first double sheet of your exam has all the formulae that you need, and as well as the constants. So G is supposed to be 9. Don't ever be tempted to write G as 10, because they're going to deduct a mark. Now, while on this one again, I'm going to talk about the law of SF. Significant figures, please make sure that you read the question thoroughly, paying attention to the number of significant figures that are given in the raw data. This is very, very important for both AS and A-level physics candidates. So number of significant figures should be adhered to. So you look at the least SF, okay, the least number of significant figures. That's what your answer should be stated to. So answers must be stated to the least number of SF in the question. So when you read the question, pay attention to the significant figures that they give you. Right, tip number 3, don't look around, please, because time is limited. So make sure that you just focus on your question paper. Focus on the question paper. Do not look around. And you just occasionally lift your head to just check the clock. I think I'm going to talk about this a little later. So check the clock regularly. So you only lift your head when you're checking the clock, and you please mean business when you are writing the exam. On that note, this leads us to the tip number 4, which says that you should start by writing fast, then slow down later. So write fast because you do not know the time, right? Most candidates do not finish the exam because they start in a relaxed mood. So please do not relax, okay? So no relaxing. Start writing fast, and then you adjust the speed to which you're moving as you go onwards. So going back to that point now where I said that you should check the clock regularly, you are checking now on, like you're looking at a question and see how many minutes you've taken to finish it. Okay, so how much time you spent. And then if it's taking too long, please leave that question, because you always come back to it later. That is, if you start off by moving fast, do not waste time on that question. So check the clock regularly. Say question number 1, I finished it in about 7 minutes, and then question number 2, I'll finish it in the night. So you know how many questions, and you divide the time. So if your exam is 1 hour 15 minutes, you now know that the average time that you should take per question is so much. So you always stick to that. So if a question requires more detail or more time than what you have calculated when you start, that question needs to be left for a while, and then you come back to it later. So write fast, check the number of marks also on the question, check also the time regularly, and then make sure that you do not spend too much time on one question. Then tip number 6, please do not leave any blanks. So please write something about the topic if you finding it challenging. So just write something, but I suggest that if you see a question that you don't have any clue on, just continue writing the exam, leave it, go write what you know first, and then come back to it later. And when the invigilator says 5 minutes left, make sure that you just start writing something on those blanks. Do not leave anything blank. You find that you get 2 or 3 marks from that. Tip number 7. So please check your answer before moving to the next question. Now, there are questions whereby you are required to put your answer in radians, that is for angles. So check your calculator if it is not on the degrees mode in that regard. So check your calculator well, and then you do what you're supposed to do. Similarly, if you are supposed to work out simple questions and then you find your calculator on radians mode, it will give you wrong answers. So make sure that your calculator is on degrees. So the default setting on your calculator should be degrees and not radians. So that way, when you check your answer, answer for that question, you are looking at the calculator again. You're looking at also redoing the calculation, resolving it, and seeing that what answer you get. If you get the same answer, please, you know that this is the correct one. And remember also to state it to the same number of SF as the least number of SF in the raw data of the question. Tip number 8, please do not get stuck on one question. I think I've alluded to this one. Come back to it later. So that's the one that I said you mustn't leave any blank. So you leave it blank for the start of the exam, or at first glimpse, because there are no brain cells that will be moving, and then come later to it, attend to it when you know that you've exhausted everything that you know in the exam. Tip number 9, check the number of marks on the question and answer accordingly. Yes. Suppose a question says, define electric field strength. So electric field strength. And then you just say it's the force per unit charge. So you say force per unit charge. This question, if it's carrying 2 marks, you get only 1 mark. Why? Because you've got to state that this is on a stationary positive point charge placed at that point. So the fact that you didn't say that this is a positive stationary point charge, so point positive charge, which is placed in a field at that point. That would be the second mark. But if it just says define electric field strength and it's 1 mark, that's when you just say force per unit charge. So it depends on the number of marks that are given. But I always urge you, or I can just advise you rather, to write the proper definition, whether it is 2 marks or 1 mark. You always get those 2 marks as well. On that note, in my video on preparation of physics exams, I mentioned the fact that you should go through the syllabus and check the definitions according to the syllabus. So you need to answer questions according to the way the syllabus wants. Okay. In some syllabi, you find that they would want you just to have 1 mark for this one. So you answer according to your syllabus, but the syllabus changes from time to time, and it just wants you to stress a certain concepts. So please check the syllabus, study with a syllabus with you, and then make sure that your definitions are in line with the syllabus. So check the number of marks on the question and answer accordingly. Now, in the event of you being given a question that says show that, normally if it says show that and then gives you 2 marks, there's not much thinking that you need to do. Just don't start from what you're asked to show. You should start from the definitions. Okay. Now, when the question now says explaining your working, or says show that, explaining your working, normally they want you to start with the definition. So if it's a question on gravitational fields, you then have to say the explanation there will say that gravitational force provides a centripetal force. So that will be your first statement. And then you go on to say gravitational force is gmm over r squared is equal to m omega r squared, like that. So you first of all start with that statement, gravitational force provides centripetal force, and then you can go ahead and write the gmm over r squared is equal to m omega squared over m omega squared r, sorry. Tip number 10, the last tip. Please check your quantitative answers to question by resolving. Excuse me. Right, so you check your quantitative answers to question by resolving. I've already talked about this. Quantitative answers, sometimes you may forget to put one of the parameters. Like, for instance, you have an equation like F is equal to mv squared over r. So sometimes you forget to square the v. So resolve the question by making sure that v has been squared, because many people, or some of the candidates, will just leave it as mv over r on the calculator. You write the correct formula, but then on the calculator itself, you forget to square v. So resolving will help you to then identify that error. Right, so I think these are the tips that we have gone through. That the first tip is to calm down and take deep breaths. Second tip is to read the instructions very carefully and don't look around, because the time in the examination room is limited. Start writing fast and then slow down later, and check the clock regularly. Don't leave blanks, okay? Don't leave a blank or blanks. Check your answer before moving to the next question. Don't get stuck on one question, come back to it later, and then, not late, but later. Check the number of marks in the question and answer accordingly. Okay, so check the number and answer accordingly. And then tip number 10, check your quantitative answers to questions by resolving them. Okay, I hope I've done justice to all the tips. If you feel there are other tips that we could also have discussed, let me know in the comment section so that we help each other as candidates. Right, please remember to subscribe to the channel, like and share to as many candidates that you think would find this very helpful. Signing out.